The Tiger I, the most feared German tank of World War II and the most misidentified enemy vehicle of the conflict. To read US veterans' accounts and official histories compiled from after-action reports, GIs were encountering Tiger tanks behind every hedgerow and house in France as they advanced off the D-Day invasion beaches. The trouble is, none of this is true. All American reports of Tiger I tanks in France are misidentifications of more mundane German armor, primarily the Panzer IV, which has a superficial resemblance to a Tiger I in the heat of battle. In fact, 5 days before the Allied invasion of Normandy on the 1st of June 1944, there were only 6 Tiger I tanks in the whole of France. During the subsequent Battle of Normandy, 143 Tiger tanks fought, accounting for about 500 Allied armoured fighting vehicles. But, surprisingly, they never fought against the Americans. All Tiger I-equipped German panzer units were engaged in fighting British and Canadian divisions struggling to break out of the Normandy beachheads. So, if you get your history lessons from Hollywood, you are being fed nonsense. The famous battle between Tom Hanks' surrounded US Rangers and paratroopers and a pair of fearsome Tiger tanks at the conclusion to Saving Private Ryan not only never happened because it's fictional, but could not have occurred because Americans never fought Tiger I's in France. Well, that's not quite accurate. American troops did encounter Tiger tanks once in France, in one of the most unusual little fights in military history, and completely by accident. The battle for the Norman city of Caen raged from June to August 1944 on the British Second Army's front to the right of the US invasion beaches. The city, 9 miles inland, sat astride the Orne River, the Caen Canal, and several road and railway junctions. It was an important operational objective for both the Allies and the Germans. Its quick capture would lead to the British and Canadians breaking out of the close hedgerow or bocage country into good tank country to the south, and its airfield could be used to base Allied ground attack aircraft in Normandy. The British tried to seize Caen on D-Day, 6th of June 1944, but the operation was delayed, with British and Canadian forces that fought their way street by painful street into the wrecked city.
The spotlight on the Normandy fighting has moved eastward. Here, southwest of Caen, the British have widened their bridgehead across the Odon River, and one of the decisive battles of the Normandy campaign is in the making. The ripening cornfields of western France are serving as the theater for this great armored clash. The whole pace of the war at the eastern end of the beachhead is growing in speed and intensity. It is here the enemy has massed his panzer forces. Rommel, the defeated Nazi from Africa and Sicily, has thrown the elements of 7 armored divisions into the battle. But so far, these forces have been committed to the battle piecemeal, and he has nothing to show for his repeated counterattacks but dead tanks and dead defenders. Rommel is now face to face with his old desert foe, General Montgomery, and it's expected the Nazis' defeat in the desert will find its counterpart here in France.
The Germans committed almost all of their panzer forces to Caen's defense, including the heavy Tiger tank battalions, a situation advantageous to the Americans as it meant that they faced less opposition and were able to advance more rapidly than the British and Canadians. Caen fell to the Allies on the 6th of August 1944, and soon after the German army in Normandy began to collapse as the United States Operation Cobra forces, working in concert with Canadian forces, started to trap the Germans in a pocket. Between the 12th and the 21st of August, the German 7th Army and 5th Panzer Army was progressively destroyed in the Falaise pocket. but the Germans managed to get some of their heavy equipment out before the pocket's elimination. Once the Falaise pocket was removed, the way to the river Seine and Paris was open to the Allies, who began moving forward rapidly. It was during this rush forward in late August 1944 that US forces first encountered the Tiger I in France. On the 28th of August 1944, the US 3rd Armored Division was advancing rapidly towards the city of Soissons, but German forces, both frontline combat troops and rear area administrative personnel, fought hard in many small firefights as they tried to reach the safety of the Siegfried Line on the German border. As Soissons was a major communications hub, the 3rd Armored intended to capture it, cutting off some of the retreating German forces. At each village and woods, German snipers and infantry fired on US tanks and half-tracks full of US armored infantry. At the town of Braine, the 3rd Armoured's 486th Anti-Aircraft Battalion arrived just as a German train was pulling out of the station. Loaded onto the railway flat cars behind the locomotive were several German trucks and armoured cars, but most surprising of all were 3 Tiger I tanks, each wearing its narrow transport tracks, unmanned, the crews and about a company of Panzergrenadiers travelling elsewhere on the train. The unit these Tigers belong to has been somewhat debated, but many sources suggest Schwerer Panzerabteilung 503, an Army heavy tank battalion equipped with the Tiger I and the Tiger II or King Tiger tank. The 503rd had suffered badly at the start of Britain's Operation Goodwood in Normandy, its Tigers being bombed, with some of the 56-ton beasts actually flipped over onto their turrets. It lost most of its Tiger tanks during the retreat east. The 3 Tiger I's on the train at Braine were casualties of the Battle of Caen and were being sent to Germany to be rebuilt. On spotting what was happening, the Americans opened fire immediately on the train, using an M15A1 half-track, armed with a single 37mm cannon and 2 50 caliber machine guns. It raked the engine, its boiler exploding, the train rolling to a halt. Like a disturbed ant's nest, Germans swarmed over the Tigers, trying to get the tanks into action. The Tigers were impervious to the puny American rounds, and though loaded aboard flat cars, the turrets could still traverse. An 88mm shell from a Tiger's main gun would turn a US half-track into so much scrap. Realizing the danger, the half-track adjusted its fire and hosed down the stationary tanks, killing the Germans scrambling about on top and driving the survivors off the train. Some escaped into nearby woods, but were soon rounded up and taken prisoner. Soon afterwards, American GIs and local French resistance fighters clambered up onto the Tigers to survey their prizes. The vehicles had suffered heavy battle damage against the British or Canadians, and it seems that they were not deemed repairable by the Americans and were later scrapped. It would not be until November 1944 that the Americans encountered the Tiger I again, this time on the borders of Germany itself. But, in the meantime, almost every encounter with German armour would continue to be reported by US troops as fights with Tigers, helping to bolster the elusive German tank's reputation to almost mythical proportions. Please subscribe, share, and also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. Details in the description. You can also help support both of my channels through PayPal and Patreon. Details again in the description box. And finally, you can also watch my videos now on Facebook. Check out my page, Mark Felton Productions.